What was a house rule you had as a kid that you thought was completely normal until you grew up and realized not all households followed? If I told my parents I was leaving at a certain time, I had to leave at that time. Let's say I told my parents I would leave a party at 9. I couldn't leave at 8:50, or I'd get yelled at, grounded. I couldn't leave at 9:10, or I would get yelled, grounded. Same thing went for when I was leaving my house to go somewhere. Why would they ground you for coming home early? We weren't allowed to eat anything without first asking. Even a glass of water, we were required to ask first. When my boyfriend and I started dating, I would ask his parents if I could eat or drink something if I was hungry or thirsty, and it was a hard habit to break when his mom told me I could literally eat or drink anything other than the alcohol. It was so weird to just go into the fridge or pantry without permission. I sometimes have to fight the urge to ask my boyfriend if I can eat our food in our apartment. When I went to my parents' house over Christmas, I was reprimanded for getting an apple without asking first. It's just all so weird, but it used to be so normal. I had to answer the phone. Hello, this is first name last name speaking. Whenever I answered the phone, this is OBV in the 80s before caller ID on landlines. My mom tried to make my childhood friends do it too when they called me to play. As in, hi, can I talk to Jill Tulpen? Who is this? It's friend. Well, friend, when you call this house and I answer the phone, you should say hello to me and then tell me that it's you, your first name and last name, before you ask to talk to Jill Tulpen. Boy, was I popular. Maybe it's not a house rule, but when I was 6 my mom told me that if I behaved she would let me skip school on Saturdays and Sundays. One day my teacher said see ya Monday and I knew. My dad used to set up mine and my sister's Easter egg hunts in such a way we followed written clues from place to place, as way to help us learn to read. Until I was a young adult, I assumed that was how all kids did Easter egg hunts. I come from a large family. Anytime we'd order pizza, we ordered a few different kinds because, obviously, there were different preferences. Any leftovers were left in their respective boxes and placed in the oven. I did that when I lived with a couple of roommates, and of course their reaction was, I just burned this box. Why was this in the oven? My husband's mother does this. I can't tell you how many times I've nearly caught her oven on fire because she had a pizza box in there and I didn't know about it. I don't understand. Cheese needs to be refrigerated. We live in the South. It's hot and humid and mold grows everywhere. I don't know how she hasn't gotten food poisoning. My door could only be closed if I was changing clothes. If my parents suspected that I was hiding anything, they could and did go through anything to make sure. Dresser and desk drawers, bags, closet, car, whatever they felt was necessary. Even my mail was fair game. As a result, I got really good at hiding things. No whistling. We had this rule growing up, because my mom can't whistle and it pissed her off that all of us can. Now that most of us are grown, we whistle whenever we want to. If she complains, the 5 of us whistling can drown her out. All I imagine right now is 5 people aggressively whistling at their moms. If you ever ran out of toilet paper whilst on the toilet, you had to sing the Stranded song or else no one else in the house would bring you a roll. My mom freaks out about hearing commercials on TV. The second it goes to commercial break it has to be muted. She also mutes it if she thinks it's about to go to commercial, even though sometimes she's wrong, and she doesn't really pay attention, so she doesn't notice a lot of the time when the commercials are over, so she leaves it on mute when the show is back on. It's very difficult to watch TV with her. If you couldn't find something, and you asked someone for help, sibling or parent, and they found it for you, they got to punch you in the arm. Wakey time. No noise annoying mum and dad until 7 AM. This was a really necessary one. BC I was a very early riser as a kid and I loved to talk to my parents. The rule was that I could come to their bed and curl up next to them, but I couldn't talk until 7. It was actually really nice, and made sure I got enough rest myself. Tragically, once I started rowing like 7 years later, mum and dad had to get up at 4 anyway to get me to the sheds. Sorry guys. When I got in trouble I was put on reading restriction as a punishment. I loved to read as a kid, still do. So it was an effective punishment at the time. Same OMG. My parents would ground me from my DS that I loved, but it was actually just a trick so that when I was grounded it didn't really matter. Then they figured it out, and instead of grounding me from my DS, they grounded me from reading. And that was when I first started liking video games. It was funny because they never did both. Haiku night dinners. Some nights we spoke in haiku, and only haiku. If I got hurt doing a certain activity I wasn't allowed to do that activity again. I broke my wrist snowboarding when I was 16 and didn't tell her until a month later when I couldn't move my wrist at all and it required surgery with a bone graft to repair. My dad made a rule that I had to kill 7 flies a day during my summer break. Any of the kids, 7 of us, can play with any toy that is left out. The owner of the toy can't take it back until whoever's playing with it is done. If the toy is put away in the owner's room, permission must be asked. I wasn't allowed to take a shower if I was home alone. I also learned at age 7 that other households closed the bathroom door when using the toilet and keeping it open was weird. I learned that by keeping the door open at a friend's house. A friend walked by the bathroom, saw me, told their mom called my mom, and all of a sudden the new house rule was we close the bathroom door when using the toilet. We had family council every Sunday night after dinner. We would sit and say good things that happened that week, share our grievances if we had any, we always did, make a dinner menu, and assign chores. Frankly, it was stellar parenting. Though, if I mention it to my mother now, she will brag about it for a solid 20 minutes before we can move on. I had super laid-back parents, but there were a few certain things that they were randomly crazy strict about. No gum, no Play-Doh, no cereal with sugar as one of the top 3 ingredients, no Simpsons. I had basically no rules growing up, but those 4 things would make them lose their goddamn minds. I still get anxious when I'm chewing gum and I'm 35. My mum used to pay me to be my own babysitter between the ages of 10 to 14 or so. The rule was that as long as I didn't make a mess and I'd put myself to bed by the time she got home, then I got $10 in the morning. We weren't allowed to get into the fridge or the cabinets without asking permission. My family was very poor and we had a limited food budget, so eating something without permission very possibly meant eating one ingredient of a meal my stepmother was planning on cooking within the next few days. I went to friends' houses and they just ate whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted. My parents used a laissez-faire parenting style, no censorship whatsoever. I watched Rocky Horror Picture Show with my brother when I was 7. Pretty awkward when I brought the VHS with me to a sleepover at a friend's house. The parents were mortified. Not mine, but my mother-in-law and her sister will fuss at you if you wash your hands in the kitchen sink. I think that's weird. If there's a sink and some hand soap, I say wash away. My wife isn't like that. My parents would check my and my brother's teeth for sugar bugs every night after we brushed our teeth. Before we got in bed, if they thought we were trying to skip brushing our teeth, they would tell us they could see the sugar bugs in our teeth and would make us go brush again. My brother and I were so convinced these sugar bugs were real we would constantly ask when we'd be able to see them. My parents always told us only people 13 and older could see them, but by the time we got to be 13 we had completely forgotten about the sugar bugs in our teeth. I love thinking about creative parenting tactics like this. I've even used that one while babysitting a fussy kid who doesn't want to brush their teeth. Get ready for bed and it helps a lot. Tape half the house off in winter. Winter meant the thermostat was turned to 55. All vents but living room vent get closed. Magnetic sheet put on the vents to prevent leaks. Then all windows get the plastic sheeting and hairdryer treatment. Sheet hung from ceiling by staircase to prevent living room vent from sending all heat upstairs. Lots of baking done. Of course bathroom and kitchen vents stayed closed year round. Summer meant thermostat set to 80. All vents downstairs get closed and magnetic sheet put on. Curtains would be drawn 24/7. Oven use was kept to a minimum. At that point, why do you have a thermostat and HVAC system instead of a wood stove? We weren't allowed to walk in our dining room unless we were using the room for a special occasion. The carpet always had that just vacuumed look, so it was a dead giveaway if anyone walked across it. Wasn't in my home, but my aunt and uncle never let us use the upstairs washroom when we were kids because they thought we'd touch the walls with our dirty hands, so they made us piss in a jar they kept under the kitchen sink and just poured it down the drain when we were done. Never thought it was strange until I brought it up to my cousin a few years ago. We laughed pretty hard about it. Drug-free urine is hard to come by. Gotta get creative sometimes. I had to wash the dishes every night, even if I wasn't home for the meal. There were times I'd get home from an away basketball game I was on the team after 10 p.m. and the dishes had sat since they finished eating around 6:30 p.m. My older brother's nightly chore: take out the garbage. He'd be done in 2 minutes. I'd have 30+ minutes of washing, drying, putting away, and cleaning up the kitchen. Not a rule, but still to this day I am befuddled at my mother's reasoning. When I was a boy, we lived in a pretty rural part of Mexico. Horrible infrastructure. Power would often go out in the middle of the night. She would proceed to wake my brother and I up, simply to wait until the power came back on. For the life of me I cannot figure that out. She wasn't afraid of the dark. She just wanted to make sure we saw the power return. My family had a thing we called the food blanket. When we'd eat casual meals, we'd lay a blanket on the living room floor and eat on it, like a picnic. My parents didn't want to get any food on the carpet. Instead of set the table, my mom would say, "Go lay out the blanket." I remember being really confused when I learned every family didn't have a food blanket.